So, James Moffat, for those of you who don't know him, helps leaders become more story focused, both in their business and personal life, leveraging their stories and what they already know, whilst articulating them into magical and irresistible value.
Welcome to Rise to Lead, the podcast where heart-driven leaders come together to inspire and innovate. They will share actionable tips and insights that help you lead your team more successfully, advance your career or business as a leader, achieve greater impact, and experience deeper fulfillment. I'm your host, Regina Huber, guiding you through deep conversations about leadership that's rooted in service, freedom, and the desire to leave a positive mark on the world.
Welcome to Rise to Lead. With me today is James Moffat, all the way from Portugal. And we're here to discuss the art of storytelling to bring clarity to your business value. Welcome, James. Great to have you here.
Hi, Regina. Yeah, an absolute pleasure. I know we've been talking for a while and chatting, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we connected. So James Moffat, for those of you who don't know him, helps leaders become more story focused, both in their business and personal life, leveraging their stories and what they already know, whilst articulating them into magical and irresistible value for their clients' connections which their clients, connections, and family will love. Now I got it. Okay, wonderful. Well, again, James, it's a great pleasure to have you on with us. I'm very curious about how you do this. And here's my first question already. So you work with your clients to, I saw this somewhere, right, in your materials, to assess, adjust, and accelerate. So walk us through the gist of this process to get us started.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I find that storytelling is basically the essence of everything that we do on a daily basis. And we sometimes don't realize that we're all storytellers. And it's just a matter of understanding there's kind of some principles and some fundamentals that you can use in everyday life, whether it's a personal conversation you're having with friends or family, or whether it's a business professional conversation, as in trying to win clients and secure new business. But there is a methodology on what you can do. So there is what I call the art of storytelling. And the three A's that you mentioned there, I use kind of lots of different short versions. I mean, I have the three A's, I have the three C's, but you can have whatever you want, whatever resonates with you. But my three A's are assessing, because the first thing you want to do is assess the situation. Then you need to adjust. So whatever you're doing, whether it's right or wrong or just needs tweaking, you have to adjust. So if there's things that don't work, then adjust them out, so move them. If there's something that is working, how can you adjust it to make it better? And then the acceleration will then come naturally. Once you've got basically the adjustments done, then you can accelerate your business.
Okay, yeah, great. And we're going to definitely talk a little bit more about some of this. So how does the storytelling integrate into each of those three stages? How does it? So tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so storytelling, just going back a little bit. I mean, I come from an engineering background, and I moved into sales and then sales and marketing, and then headed up sales and marketing teams internationally. So I noticed over the many, many years, particularly coming from an engineering background, I wanted to know about all the bells and the whistles and the features and functionality that I was selling, because I was selling software as a service. So it was always technical sales. But then I moved into like more sales, and I wanted to, what's the art of selling? And am I selling the bells and the whistles, or am I selling the value? But if I might know my value, but it might not be the value that they're seeking. So I need to ask the questions that to find out what the problems are, Why are they interested in something else? What was happening to their business? Why is it not growing? Why are the challenges and issues that I needed to understand? Because if I don't understand, then I could be selling them something that they don't need, and it's a waste of my time and their time. So then I thought storytelling was a far better way. After many years of watching others sell and looking at the audience and seeing how painful it was and seeing people in the audience getting up to making excuses to leave a meeting, then I thought, no, this is not right. Now, if I was to meet the person one on one, and they'd probably ask me different questions. So why in a bigger audience are they following basically a slide deck that's typically driven by marketing on all bells and whistles? So then I thought, let's scrap all of that. Let's go back to the basics. Let's introduce stories, and then let's look at our references as well. Who did we sell this technology or service or product or solution to before? And what were we solving by doing it? And then looking back at kind of these customer references, well, what was it that we were solving? And then kind of dissecting that and then using that as more of a tool. Well, we have someone of a similar type business or a similar individual with their business that they're growing or whatever the case may be. What were the challenges that they were facing? How did we overcome them? And where are they now? So there's kind of three parts of that. There's the problem, the solution, and the results. And then how could we make that into a story? Well, I tell a story about them. So rather than the product or the service, that can fit in later. But we have to understand their needs and their desires first and what the problem was. So that's how it kind of blended in.
That is so key. Even also when you pick a coach, right? I've had that experience myself sometimes that it wasn't just a waste of time for both sides, maybe, but also a waste of money, waste of budget. And we also want to avoid that. So I really love this approach. And so in this whole process that you just described, where do most people or leaders, business owners get stuck most typically?
They, they get stuck. I mean, there's many aspects, but I mean, they can get stuck not being able to grow. They've been comfortable kind of with maybe one or two clients. And when it comes to a growth and they want more, they've kind of run out of ideas on how to do that, how to sell their value, how to leverage on existing clients and references, which we completely neglect, right? And what worked for them, why did they become a client? And then they did an excellent reference rather than kind of making up stories. You have real customers. So leveraging on those. So they become stuck because they don't look and see what they've already got, the kind of the tools in their tool bag, basically. They completely neglect that and they're looking for new clients in a cold calling method. And they kind of start them from the beginning every time they're looking for someone new, rather than leveraging on what they've already got and the success that they've got with the ones that they have. And I mean, I always believe in you can have a one-time client or you can have a lifetime client. Well, obviously, we want the lifetime because it doesn't matter what you're doing in the future. You can always go back to them and possibly upsell because you have something that you've always had established a good relationship with. So that was one of the stumbling points. But there was many others. There was pricing. There was value. I mean, people think, well, if I put a bigger price on something, does that mean I'm going to scare people away? But then they forget about the value that they're bringing and their expertise and the knowledge and everything that they know. Then that's worth something, but they don't know how to position that. So there was many aspects and parts of the journey, everything from kind of the very front end, the cold calling, which I call warm calling now because there's a different way you can do it, to what kind of price do I ask? And then how do I find my clients? And there's a methodology into that as well. But storytelling can be blended into every aspect of that journey. And because we all like stories, and if stories resonate with you and it's the story you want to hear, then you want to know more. So
Right.
that's why I say the essence of storytelling and the art of it is something that we can all do, and we do it inadvertently, but we don't realize that we actually do it. And I can explain that later.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious about that. And also, yeah, absolutely. Stories are memorable. It's what we remember, right? Because usually they also, or oftentimes at least, they make an emotional connection somehow. And they create images in our minds. We automatically create those images, and that's how we then remember the story, right? Yes, tell us a little bit more about what you just hinted at.
Yeah. So if you look at it, we, by default, most of us actually are great storytellers.
Mhm.
And we often don't see that because nobody's ever said that to us, and nobody's actually recognized it. And we've never looked at the components of the story before. So, as an example, right, my wife came to me and she said she wanted to go away for a weekend abroad with her friends that she studied with at university, and they're all living in different countries. So they're all agreed that they're going to meet in one particular country and they're going to have a weekend as a kind of a reunion and get together. But she didn't know how I would feel about that. So she had to think carefully about the approach, because I would then have to stay at home with three kids and for the weekend while she's off having fun. So she approached it. So that was what she wanted. Her desired outcome, because I always believe in that you have to look at the end result. What do you want to achieve by that? What's your goal? What's your desired outcome in mind? And then work back from that to formulate how do you get to that. So then her desired outcome was that she wanted to go for a weekend away with the girls, right?
Mhm.
But then she had to think, how is she going to say that? If she just says to me, James, I want to go away for the weekend with the girls, and you're looking after three kids, my first reaction would be, no bloody way, right? You're not leaving me with three kids for a weekend. I could say that. I mean, that could be a reaction. Uh, or I could say, yeah, go away and have fun. And yeah, I'm okay with the kids. So she had to think carefully, what could my reaction be? And how could she place this that was so good? So then she started telling me a story. So she started saying, remember when I was studying at university, and like she was telling me, and she said that I met some really great people, and how their lives have evolved and what they're doing now. And we don't often keep in touch. And then now she's like, prompt me, well, why aren't you keeping in touch? And I'm contributing to her story. So now I'm actually feeding it. Right. And so she, with the right wording and the way that she's described it, it's really touched on, like, as you said earlier, about emotions. It's touched on my emotions. Oh, you should see this. You should see these. When did you last see them? And she says, actually, and then she comes into the kind of the punchline. She says, I want to go and see them next weekend. And and but because she's already led me through a story, and then you can add more spice to it as you go along, so that's the kind of the middle bit. She's hooked me at the beginning. She's like, take me on this journey, but she's added value into that, right? And then she wants to hit me with a punchline, right? Which she did. And then in the end, I said, have got to go. You've got to go and see them. And then she said, oh, but what about the kids? No, I'll be okay. I look after them. And then in the end, she got what she wanted. And
Yes.
yeah, if I was to ask her, right, are you a storyteller? Oh, no, 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 I'm not a storyteller. And I said, well, what about for business and for work and for social life? No, no, I don't know how to tell stories. And I said, you're a brilliant storyteller. Most people are, they just don't realize it. And I said, you had me with the hook. You had me with the middle bit to keep me engaged. And then you had me with the desired outcome, the punchline at the end. You've done it. So we do it inadvertently. So all I'm doing is extracting that art and making it so easy to understand that we're all natural. Well, most of us are natural storytellers. You just need to enhance the way you do it, and then you can add other tools to that, which I can also explain if you want.
Yeah, sure. What I really find brilliant about this also is she basically gave you a choice to say, yes, I'm going to take care of the
Yeah,
children. Because you didn't say, oh, you have to. You got to do this. But it was like, oh, but what about? So the question, that's very smart. Definitely a
no,
great tool already. And we were going to talk about some tools. Yes, please do.
yeah. So other things you can add in. So I did some NLP training, so
Mhm.
neuro linguistic programming. So even on the very most simplistic terms of that, everybody can apply that. So basically, what it is how to manipulate or how to leverage on a conversation, how to swing it around. Politicians are actually fantastic at this. I think they must do extensive training on it because they always avoid the question. And they have a way to switch it around that they then ask you the question, right? So if it was a reporter asking a politician a question and it's an awkward question, they would switch it round and ask them why they're asking the question and then put them on the spot. So you can also, so that's basically neuro linguistic programming, NLP. So you can do the same. So you can ask people, say, uh, yeah, what is you can ask open or closed questions. So when you've actually engaged with someone and you're trying to work with someone and convert them into being a client, you can ask them open questions like, what is the biggest problem that you're facing at the moment? Well, it's an open question. It's not yes or no, right? So
Mhm.
they have to answer the question. Well, in most cases, they have to answer the question, right? Or if you say, right, are you having problems with your business? I mean, that's more of a closed question. They'll say yes or no. They say yes. So the way that you can then inject that into the conversation, you can be very clever about how you do it. So you can either use that as a hook to start with, right? Are you having problems with your business? Yes. So you just wanted to know yes or no at the beginning. If they said no, then well, I'm not really here for you because I can't help you if you're not having any problems. But if they said yes, then that's the hook to get in, right? So you can think about how do you want to start a conversation and then how do you want to end the conversation. So you have to then bring out the tools accordingly. So NLP is a great one for asking open or closed questions.
Okay, yes,
Now I
absolutely.
could ask you, does that make sense? So the question to you is, does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm asking you a kind of a closed question, like, does it make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah,
Yes, it makes sense. So
yeah.
I'll say, well, what I could then ask you, like, what makes sense? Why do you think it makes sense? And then you have to
Mhm.
answer. So, I mean, so you can play around with that. So that's
Right.
a great tool once you understand. And you only need to know the basic principles, right? You don't need to know everything about NLP.
Right. Yes, you can use it to get confirmation, to get a
Exactly.
buy-in, right? Or a, even like uh, immediate approval to something.
Yeah. Well,
So
if you,
yeah, absolutely.
uh,
And
yeah,
information.
no, exactly. If you look at public speakers,
Mhm.
uh, they typically do that. I mean,
Mhm.
if they're talking about something, they want to make sure that the audience are still engaged. So they could just pause for a minute and then they could ask the audience, does this all make sense? And then to exaggerate that a bit more, they could put their hand up. So physically, like put their hand up, right?
Mhm.
Does that all make sense? Raise your hand. And because they're putting their hand up, people follow suit.
Right.
So you find that you're the odd one out if you're sitting there without having your hand up. So they use body language as well. So there is definitely an art to storytelling, which is also public speaking. Public speaking is also an art of storytelling. I like to umbrella it all under storytelling, whether it's for personal use, business use, or whatever.
Right. Yes, a typical signature talk. often starts with a story or has an element of a story, right? Whether that's our own story or a client's story, as you had mentioned before, or something like that, that is relevant, of course, to the topic. And that's what creates that initial connection with the audience also. I
Mhm.
mean, apart from maybe using a specific hook right away when we start speaking and all these other different speaking tools, but the story has such a critical role in this, right? So, uh, let's talk a little bit about, so you talk about bringing clarity to business value through storytelling, and you've touched on this already, of course, intrinsically. Uh, but what are leaders or business owners typically unclear about when it comes to their own value, and how does story cut through that confusion?
Right. So more often than not, they don't realize the value that they've got. So they don't always list the value that they bring. And that sometimes it's too easy to sell on, as I was saying, the bells and the whistles and the features and functionality rather than the true value. So a lot of the true value is also the care that they show towards their clients, the aftercare, the way that they engage with them. That is not that hard, pushy sale. And yeah, so I think authenticity comes into this a lot. You can tell when someone is more of a shark and trying to sell you and push you into something that you don't necessarily want. So it's about bringing out that personal value. It's that more empathy and the emotional connection uh, is value as well that people often disregard or overlook. So it's not just about the quality, maybe, of the product or the services that you sell. It's how you sell them and what is the relationship. Because at the end of the day, people buy from people,
Yes.
right? And I'm typically, I noticed in sales when I worked for big corporate companies, people were buying from me, not although they still needed the product, but there were if there was a choice of several different suppliers with exactly the same technologies, then I found that I would win them over because of my personal approach and what I was promising to them. And I don't like to make false promises. So you can see that authenticity. So that is a value that is, as I said, is often overlooked. And that definitely plays a key role. I mean, if you were trying to differentiate yourself from, if you're a business coach, as an example, and there's 1,001 business coaches all doing something similar, well, how do you differentiate your services? And it's typically because of you. You are the thing that's different in your business. You aren't the same as the other coach. You look different, you act different, and everything else. So why not sell on the value of you? And therefore, you're absolutely unique then because nobody else is you. So
Right.
don't try to sell the same as this other person. You're selling effectively yourself as well. And if you've watched any programs like The Dragon's Den or The Shark Tank, where they have the investors and the person pitching. Now, a lot of the time, the person pitching has been pitching something that is really not viable, is not going to work. But they've shown such desire and passion and wanting to do this that the investor has said, look, I'm not going to invest today in your product, but I'm going to invest in you. I think you've got the right attitude that would be great for any business, right? So I'm going to invest in you, right? And you hear that more often. So that is the differentiator. So that is another value that you can bring into the equation that is unique.
Absolutely. And it actually reminds me of a client relationship of mine, of my own, because there was this lady who came several years ago who came basically to work toward a promotion with me. Okay. And then it turned out that life happened and a, a death happened in her family, and it really affected her quite a bit. Uh, and we just really needed to completely refocus for most of the time, first of all. And the reason for that was that that first conversation had given her the trust. And uh, I think that's what you're also alluding to, right? And what happened, and this is really beautiful, I want to share this real quick, is just recently, years later, she published an article where she talked about her experience also with me in that
Yeah,
article. And it was
excellent.
such a beautiful thing to see.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, that becomes then, I think you mentioned earlier, it's memorable. I mean, when you have these relationships, I mean, I've had clients that I've not seen for 20 years, but I could call them up and we still have that connection because it became personal. Right. And
Yeah.
that's how I like to do business on a personal level. I I'm selling something because I truly believe that it's going to bring them value. But I mean, now I'm not in the corporate world. I help them bring value for what it is that they're selling. But I typically work with uh, business owners or startups or small to medium sized enterprises.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So
But
let's
I didn't tell you about my three C's.
tell me about them. Tell us about them.
All right. I know it's a bit cliche. I mean, you talk about three A's and three C's, and people say, well, what about the three B's? And I could probably make one up for that as well. But I mean, I just created that because uh, I I had a mentor as well. I think everybody has a mentor or a guide of some sort or a
Mhm.
coach when they're transitioning, particularly from the corporate world to doing their own thing, because it's a big step and we don't always know the right way. And we're yeah, we don't have the knowledge and the know-how to do everything. So you need some guidance. So I had some guidance as well back in 2016. But nevertheless, my three C's come into that because my mentor at the time, ironically, was Kevin Harrington. He's the original shark of the Shark Tank, right?
Yeah.
And he was a great guy, but he kept talking about his three things that he does. He talked about teasing. You've got to tease, then you've got to please, and then seize. And that was his three things. That was his kind of signature, right? You've got to tease the audience, please the audience, and seize the audience, right? And having three kids, I'm always telling the kids, stop teasing each other. So I never liked tease. And I
Mhm.
thought, I don't want to tease anybody, right? And I just thought it was a negative rather than something positive. I mean, I don't want to be teasing you. And so I looked at it, what it was, and I thought, well, it could be the three C's. So the first C is connect. You've got to connect with your desired audience. Now, whether it's going to be a client at the end of the day or whatever. And I'll give an example of this afterwards. So you've got to connect. Then what you need to do once you've connected, you need to communicate. So you
Mhm.
need to communicate whatever it is that you're doing to bring immense value, right, to them and not wasting their time. But there's also a time limit on this. You can't ramble on forever because then they fall asleep. So everything also has to be done in certain time frames, which could be another discussion in itself, right? And then the last C was convert. I want them to convert to my desired outcome. So, what did I have in mind I wanted to do? So, if I'm going to connect with this person, what do I want to achieve at the end? If it was just the connection, maybe that was simple. So, I've achieved that by, say, I want to connect with someone on LinkedIn because I think that they could be a potential client. So how am I going to connect with them? So I want to connect with them. Then maybe I want to drop them a message. So that's the communicate. And then if they say, yeah, I'd love to connect with you and tell me more, or why did you want to connect? Then I get my convert because then I get that connection. So it could be something very simple, but it could be something much bigger. But this is kind of the three C's that you also need within the storytelling.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I've also met Kevin actually in person once. I met him once at a big event. I think it was in San Diego. And I quickly talked to him. Of course, everybody wanted to talk to him, as they always, people want to talk to people who are successful to get their tips and whatnot. So it was a short conversation, but yeah. So
I can,
connect, communicate, convert.
yes. So I can show you an example. I'll give you an example,
Mhm.
right? A very simple example, right? Imagine a comedian on stage.
Yeah.
So they're in a big auditorium. There's 1,000 people there, and right there is a comedian that wants to tell a joke with a punchline at the end. And the desired outcome is they want the audience to laugh,
Mhm.
right? So the whole setup and everything for the comedian is right to invite the right people, his desired audience, to the event, to the auditorium, right? Because if he's going to tell certain types of jokes, I'm just using him as an example, right? And jokes as an example. There's only certain jokes that certain people like, and there's other jokes that you don't like. So you've got to connect with the right people to bring into the auditorium. So, however you do that with your flyers, your promotion, your marketing, whatever. So now he's got the audience there. So he's connected. He's connected with the right people that are going to enjoy that type of joke, right? Because he's already advertised what it's going to be. So now they're all sitting there in the auditorium and he's going to tell a joke. So he starts off with his story, right? And then gets to the middle bit. So he keeps them engaged. He uses some NLP or whatever. He's got their audience really on the edge of their seat, wanting to know the punchline. So that middle bit is the communicate. So he's communicating with them all the time, right? Bringing value. Now he wants to drag it on or as long as he wants, depending if it's a long story, and he's keeping people anxious for that punchline, right? Or he could make it short, right? So that's really like his skill, what he's got to bring. So he's doing that. Then at the end, he wants to make them laugh, which is to convert. So if they laugh, then he's achieved his goal. They've converted. So then he's achieved the three C's: the connecting with the audience, they're communicating with them, and then converting to his desired outcome, which is for them to laugh, right? And that's the way you can break it down. So when he's looking for his audience, now it can apply to business. When I'm looking for my audience, the more granular I am, the easier it is to find. So if I'm looking for like one person businesses, entrepreneurs that are coaches or something, then in a certain region, then the more granular it is, it's easier to find them. And then what's the message I take, which is the connection, and then if I convert, then to get them as a client. So, but I think using the comedian one is a great one because you wouldn't bring in the wrong audience to tell them a jokes that they're not interested in. So when people say to me, I ask them, what's the challenges that you're facing with your business? And they say, I need more clients. And I said, who are your clients? What's the typical client? They said, business people. And I said, well, what sort of business people? Oh, anyone. I said, right, go out and find anyone. There's a world full of anyones, right? And then they look at me odd, right? And I think you have to narrow it down. And if you look at the way that social media works, like the algorithms in Facebook, as an example, when you're doing a marketing campaign, they drill you right down to the city, the location, the type of person, the salary, everything, right? Because they want to target exactly the person that you want. But when you try to do it yourself, you're too broad-minded in the way, or it's an open field in the way that it's anyone in business. So then you're making it very difficult for yourself because anybody could be anybody. And when you're having a conversation with people, which also goes to your back to your audio logo and how you present yourself, right? Which is another kind of continuation of this. It's how you can hook someone right at the very beginning with an interest, which is very clever as well, which is another tip and a tool in your toolbox to kind of use.
Yes, and of course, if it's everybody, then they will not recognize themselves as your ideal client because you haven't really defined much.
Yeah,
So it's really hard for them to recognize themselves as a potential uh,
yeah,
person who can get value from the work you offer, right? Or from the
yeah.
product. So let's talk a little bit about something that I saw somewhere about childhood to C-suite, right? So we often invite people to explore stories from childhood to today or to their C-suite role. So why can this early narrative be very powerful for leaders in this context of storytelling?
Right. So having three kids, I looked at storytelling. I mean, I do storytelling for children as well, but
Mhm.
also identifying emotional traumas through storytelling, which is another topic we could talk for hours on. But anyway, I started with my children. I find that the biggest challenge when the kids were young was to try and get them to go to bed at night. So that was the challenge. I mean, once they were in bed, they didn't want to go to sleep. They wanted to play, and it was getting later. And my wife set me the challenge. Right, it's your turn to put them to bed and get them to go to sleep. Right. And I thought, how am I going to do that? So that was kind of one of the early days of storytelling, which I saw the power in that. So the challenge was obviously to get them to go to bed and want to go to bed. So then I thought, well, let's do storytelling. So I would take typically at the time a Mr. Man book. You know, the Mr. Men book, you got Mr. Happy, Mr. Sad, Mr. Tall, Mr. Small, Mr. There was just very short little story books,
Okay.
right? And they were great to read, right? So I started to read those. But then with my eldest son at the time, I think he was around 5. I mean, he said to me, Daddy, I don't want these stories anymore. He said that I want my stories. And I said, can you tell me my stories? And I thought, oh, how are we going to do that? So I thought about like with business, I thought there's a start, there's a middle and an end, right? Right. With any story, you start, how do you start? Like once upon a time or whatever, and how do you end? And they all lived happily ever after. And then the bit in the middle. So then I thought, oh, okay, so we got very creative, and with children, they have a great imagination and creativity, although it seems to be suppressed more and more. I wanted to bring that out. So then we thought of a theme. So we thought of what could we call these stories at bedtime? So I love the word marvelous, and there's another story behind the story, right? But we would digress too much if I was to tell you that. But anyway, I love the word marvelous. So I thought, let's use marvelous in it. The marvelous adventures. It sounds good already. So the marvelous adventures of Tom, my eldest son, and Doodoo, which is his fluffy bedtime rabbit. So the marvelous adventures of Tom and Doodoo going wherever we're going on that journey for that night. So the very first story, funny enough, he wanted to be about going to the moon. So it was the marvelous adventures of Tom and Doodoo going to the moon. And then I thought, well, we need to start this. So how do we start? So we want the start and the end to always be the same. In the middle bit is the magic in between. So we started off like a ding-a-ling-a-ling, the alarm goes off at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they all start the same. And then we end, and they brushed their teeth, put the pajamas on, and went to bed. Right, but then the magic was in the middle, the bit that brings in their imagination and creativity. So anyway, to cut a long story short, uh, the first story was about Tom and Dudu going to the moon. Then we thought to make it interactive, because I talk about interactive storytelling. And I said, well, what's interactive? What is storytelling? What's the difference? Interactive is when the audience participate. It's not just you telling the story, it's they're part of that journey. So how could he be part of the journey? It's not my story, it's his story. So how can he, my son, blend in his imagination? I'm just the narrator. So I'm just the storyteller, but I want it to be his story, right? So that's how it started. And in the end, we audio recorded it. We created our first book, which is published actually. That's the very first book we ever did. And we've got thousands upon thousands of other stories to be created and published in books. And then I did it with the twins, my other kids, later. And did it achieve the goal that I set out to do? Yes, they couldn't wait to go to bed because they were having story time. And more so when it started to become interactive, because I would record them and they would tell the story. So they started off ding-a-ling-a-ling, ding-a-ling-a-ling. The alarm went off at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then they ended the story and they injected in the story the whole story, right? And the most amazing stories ever. But what did that value did that bring? It brought them the desired outcome. They went to bed. They went to bed happy. They didn't go to bed miserable and feeling negative or doom and gloom or anything scary. It was always happy, jolly stuff, right? We created audio recordings, which are memorable and priceless. We created a book. We've created something that will live with them forevermore, that they can do and share with their children. And yeah, it's just an all-round great experience. And the biggest thing, the inseparable bond that you create with your children. Now, if you look at that compared to what I said earlier with business, that's why you need that personal touch. And that's the value that you bring with business, because you want that bond with that person. Now, if they move company as well, you've still connected with them because you've connected on a personal level, right? So that was the essence and how to make storytelling, not just about telling stories, but how to achieve many goals and outcomes that you wanted.
Yeah, including legacy.
Yeah,
It's so
exactly.
beautiful, right? Yes, and there's another big. This is a really really beautiful example, and it's all still relevant because it's all transferable to business, right? So it's just amazing how it works in every single area of your life. So one bigger topic that I actually would love to potentially discuss some other time, James, is storytelling in teams, because
Mhm.
we certainly cannot pack everything about storytelling into one single podcast episode, but that is something we could potentially discuss if you're up for it. And then you're, of course, welcome to come on again.
No, I would love to, because I mean, yeah, as you know, that I do a podcast, and I'd like to do the opposite, invite you to my podcast.
Okay.
But it's all about sharing stories, for fundamentally for three reasons: to inspire the audience, the listener,
Mhm.
to educate, because some of these stories are very educational, and most importantly, to bring much needed hope, because a lot of people are feeling lost and disillusioned at the moment. And if you can bring hope through other people's stories, then it's only a good and honorable thing to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and stories, I have a lot of those. I have a lots of stories.
Yeah,
I mean, I put some of my stories and my uh, adventures and whatnot and experiences into my book a
yeah.
couple of years ago too. So, yeah, is there anything else that you would like to share with us today, though, before we leave here?
Yeah, just one thing. There's a few things that I'm actually doing uh, that are very important to me at the moment. So
Okay.
I I love hearing people's stories. I love sharing my stories, as you've noticed. But I mean, I love hearing other people's stories as well. And yeah, we did with the podcast. I mean, the 8 of us, so me and 7 of my guests, we co-authored our first book. So they already shared their stories on the podcast, but then I said, well, that's great, but you want something tangible, something in your hand, something that you can have on the shelf, something you can give to friends and family. So a book. So we wrote our stories in the book. So we launched that last year. So it's called The Essence of Being Human. And it's about 8 magical, wonderful people's stories. And they're really heartfelt stories. So, I mean, I can share the link with that. So that's one thing I do. So I want more people to come and help to write their stories. And basically, if you just want to write your own story and not be in a collaborative joint book, then I'm doing a program on that as well, on people that I've always thought about writing a book but never done it, that they want to share either their story or maybe write a book of different stories, and just do it with a group of people in a wonderful kind of light-hearted but professional way.
Wow, yeah, definitely. I'm just checking my links here that I have for you. I think I don't have that book link yet, so if you want to share that with me after, that would be amazing. And yes, what's the best way, the quickest way for people to get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
Right. The best way is LinkedIn, basically.
Mhm.
So uh, I I'm on that regularly, and I'll always answer people's messages. So if you reach out and want to connect with me, I mean, I can share the link there, and that's the best way. I've got links within my profile that if you want to schedule a call with me, ask me questions, or learn more about what I do, then all the links are under my profile under the contact information.
Yes, and I'll definitely add the LinkedIn link. I have that for sure as well. Uh, okay, well, this has been fabulous, James. Thank you so much for coming on Rise to Lead. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you and to learn so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you once again for the invitation, and congratulations on your birthday.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes. So, to all our listeners, thanks for being here and until next week. Are you ready to create real change in your leadership, your career, your life? Join me for a complimentary Lead and Thrive session, a 60-minute one-on-one strategy session where we will discuss your specific needs and map out the next steps to lead yourself and others powerfully. Spots are limited, so don't wait. Visit transformyourperformance.com/Lead Thrive session to book your Lead and Thrive session today. Let's work together to make it happen.
Thank you for tuning in to Rise to Lead. Keep shining your light, standing up for what's right, and inspiring others to step into their brilliance. If you like this episode, please give it a 5-star rating and subscribe to the Rise to Lead podcast on your preferred podcast app. Until next time, it's Regina Huber, and in the meantime, remember to rise to lead.